Our session this week is focused on two different themes: resisting Mammon and resisting consumerism. And I differentiate between these two by saying the first is more focused on money as mammon, its lies. So we're looking at money as mammon, its lies as a power. The second part, consumerism, then we turn our focus more to things we get with money, the goods we purchase. Now, the reality is these are closely intertwined. And then actually, other themes we'll be looking at in weeks ahead: TV, internet, food, chastity, sexual fidelity are related to these same themes as well. But again, for differentiating, but we'll pull them apart, try to focus on them in their different ways. So I'd like to introduce the whole by looking at a short news article that I read some years ago that I think has these themes intertwined in it. So this was an article. It's about an island in the Pacific called Nauru. That's Nauru. And I encourage you to look it up. It's a little tiny dot there out in the Pacific. So I'm going to read the article to you because I want you to feel the author's words. And it's a short little article. The people of Nauru, an isolated Central Pacific nation, rejoiced when they learned that they would make a fortune from bird-dropping deposits. Now they wonder if the wealth they accumulated was really worth it. Nauru was once an island paradise. Now, some 50 years after rich phosphate deposits were first mined, large parts of the island look like a moonscape, and the health of its citizens has deteriorated dramatically. For almost 50 years, Britain, Australia, and New Zealand administered Nauru and jointly mined the rich phosphate deposits, the result of an accumulation of thousands of years of bird droppings. The people of Nauru became the richest per capita in the region. The 8,000 or so Nauruans still boast a much higher average per capita income than other Pacific Islanders, $4,455 in 1996, thanks to $400 million in trust funds. But while other nations have increased their life expectancy of their people along with increases in gross national income, things in Nauru have gone the other way. Nauru, scarred by many years of mining, has very little soil left for growing vegetables. The islanders live on a narrow coastal strip. Junk food, alcohol, and cigarettes have replaced native habits and diet. And the people of Nauru now suffer from obesity. 4/5 of the people who die in Nauru are people below the age of 65, says Dr. Gwadin Galaya. It is a serious problem. The island now relies almost exclusively on food shipped from Australia, New Zealand, and Fiji. Increased incomes have allowed the locals to buy vehicles and stop walking. So just, picture this. So there's this island, the middle of it is totally mined out, and there's this little strip along the edge. But they've gotten money, so they've bought cars, they're walking less, there's nowhere to grow anything, so they drive their cars to little shops where they get a variety of canned food that is shipped in, expensive sweet beverages, alcoholic drinks, cigarettes, and any fruit that's there, very, very expensive. Health officials say that if the people of Nauru simply changed their lifestyles, their health and life expectancy would improve. If not, another generation of Nauru citizens will grow up to become adversely affected by the wealth that should have been the country's greatest blessing. Now, I want to read that last sentence again for you. So listen to what the author says here. It says, if they change their lifestyles, things would go fine. But he says, if they don't, the citizens will grow up to become adversely affected by the wealth that should have been the country's greatest blessing. Okay, now, what did you feel in this article? What's the article portray? The article portrays that their wealth has done what? Their wealth has destroyed them. Destroyed their island, wrecked their lives, ruined their health. And the article, a brief article, but the writer of the article does a good job at communicating that. But what was the very last thing the author wrote? their wealth that should have been their greatest blessing. So do you feel that? The author has written this article graphically portraying how their wealth has wrecked their lives, but do you feel the author still has the default? Wealth should be what? Should be blessing. So here an author, even an author who so graphically communicates like this could ruin you, says it should have been a blessing. So what's the assumption there? The assumption is that money is the best thing they could have, a blessing. But the reality is they ruin their lives trying to get it, and the things they are consuming, buying, are ruining them. Destroying their land so they can get money. Money allows them to consume more, and what they consume is destroying them. Blessing or curse. Now, that article is from 1997. The sad story of Nauru has continued in the decades since then. They've turned towards, because, the phosphate deposits are running out, they've turned towards offshore banking. They're housing refugees. Can you imagine that, being a refugee shipped to Nauru, this bombed out place? So they're getting refugees that Australia is rejecting. Australia is paying Nauru to host them. They're in a downward spiral. What has their wealth done for them? Blessing or curse? The Bible portrays a very different assumption about wealth. The Bible warns us about it. It is different perspective in other ways as well. For instance, think about this verse from Paul from Philippians. He writes, I know how to live on almost nothing or with everything. I have learned that secret of living in every situation. Whether it's with a full stomach or empty, with plenty or little, for I can do everything with the help of Christ who gives me the strength I need. Now notice, Paul talks there about the secret. The secret of what? Of living with little, but also with a lot. Now in general, people would think the challenge is what? The challenge is living with a little, having very little income. That's a challenge. We recognize that. Paul says he's learned the secret of living with a little. But Paul also says what? He's learned the secret of living with a lot. Now, if you went and asked your neighbors, most of them would say, hey, living with a lot, no problem. I can take care of that. But Paul knows, no, there's a secret to both. There's a challenge to both. Something that the author of that article wasn't recognizing. And then how does the verse end? Paul proclaims that through Christ we can live out an ethics of possibility. An ethics of possibility in relation to money, in relation to mammon. But first we must recognize the problem. Recognize that there's a challenge here. So, ethics of possibility, but we must recognize a challenge. So in regards to alienation, let's review our basic aim in this course. As Christian communities, we're seeking to think about how to resist things that hinder us from being the humans God has created us to be, and then doing things that facilitate, that help us be more the people God created us to be. So how do we curtail alienating practices and behavior? I invite you, take some time and reflect on this question. Jot down some notes. How does money, mammon, alienate? What are ways that money, mammon, alienates? That is, how does it distort relationships and separate us from ourselves, others, and God? With all of what you just thought of in mind, think of Jesus' words. To serve God, not mammon. Think of it through the lens of ethics as gift. God loves us and seeks to lessen the destructive consequences of mammon in our lives by calling us to serve God rather than mammon. Did you feel that? Why does God say that? Very challenging phrase. Serve God or mammon. It's out of love. It's for our good. God guides us toward the possibility of escaping this destructive force and enables a life of freedom from mammon. So again, take note of how I'm saying that. It's out of love. God enables this. Now, the Bible has an immense amount on money and wealth. And it leaves me thinking this is a very, very important topic. If we just go by quantity of attention given to it in the Bible, I think one that most churches and Christians do not wrestle with enough. Honestly, I find it overwhelming to deal with in the short amount of time we have this week. We will begin with a quick overview of some biblical teaching that you will read, and then after that reading, we'll go in depth in one passage in another video.